Hey Optimancers, Chris here. Welcome to the third part of my tier ranking series for D&D racial options, or species, or whatever you want to call them. Now I know some of you listen to these videos while you're driving, and I want to facilitate that as much as possible. So when I complete each ranking, I'll make sure to announce it clearly, but if you can't hear me over your engine, maybe your muffler system fell out of your vehicle. That happened to someone who was driving from Sacramento, California to Reno, Nevada. Now, when something like this happens, I'm probably not the right person to accurately diagnose why it happened. All I know for sure is this driver was not a subscriber. So maybe that was the reason, or maybe it wasn't. Seems kind of 50-50 to me. Not something you really should take a chance on, so if you aren't subscribed, now is probably a really good time to do so. Unless you can't hear me over your engine, in which case 20 seconds ago probably would have been better. So the intention of this series is, rather than to just give you my opinion on the tier ranking for each racial option, instead, and a patron used this term and I thought it was a good descriptor, is to do a quote-unquote quasi-objective tier ranking by assigning point values to each racial feature, then adding them up, then placing them on this chart in a relatively even spread. What you see on your screen is our tier ranking so far, and this includes all the races from the Player's Handbook, and half the ones from Mordenkainen's Presents, Monsters of the Multiverse. I'm looking at the second half of that book today, alphabetically from H onwards. I created some guidelines for assigning point values to various features, so I could create as much consistency as I could when assigning points across over 70 racial options and over hundreds of racial features. In my preview video to this series, I went over it in detail, and I'll link that up above. Otherwise, I do have an abbreviated version in the video description if you like, but here is the ultra abbreviated version. You get a free feat, that's going to give you 125 points. Unlimited duration flight, 100. If you have a 30-foot teleport as a bonus action, proficiency bonus uses per long rest, that would give you 50 points. Advantage on some saving throws is going to give you up to 35 points maximum. Damage resistance, up to 20 points maximum. Dark vision is worth 10 or 15 points depending on the range of your dark vision. And ribbon features will get fewer than 10 points, like an extra skill proficiency would get you 4 points, or 5 if you get to choose, while a tool proficiency would get you 1 point. And I should start with just a little bit of housekeeping. I need to issue a correction for a mistake in a previous video. When I ranked the gnomes in the Player's Handbook, I assigned 25 points to Gnome Cunning, the same point value that I assigned to the Deep Gnome's Gnomish Magic Resistance. A viewer pointed out to me that the Player's Handbook gnomes get advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws against all magic. Well, Deep Gnomes is just against spells. So, if they come up against something like a Mind Flayer, for example, whose Mind Blast is described as magical, but definitely isn't a spell, the Player's Handbook gnomes get the advantage, and the Deep Gnome doesn't. So I figure the Player's Handbook gnome should be getting 30 points for that feature, not 25. This changes the point total of the Rock Gnome to 30, and the Forest Gnome to 35. So here are their corrected positions on the tier chart. It's not dramatic. They both still rank low Ds, but the Player's Handbook Dragonborn now has its proper position at the bottom of the bottom. So that out of the way, let's get going. Harengon. I figure the Harengon is one of the most powerful races in the game, but I think a focus on initiative is probably an optimization thing because I don't always see it ranked highly in other tier lists. But Hair Trigger is just mechanically really good. The Harengon adding the proficiency bonus to initiative rolls is good right from level 1, but it only gets better at levels 5, 9, 13, and 17. I consider Hair Trigger right up there with Blessing of the Raven Queen, and even better than Halfling Luck, which is my favorite, so I have assigned it 70 points. Leporine Senses is a free skill proficiency, 4 points. Then Lucky Footwork, which really isn't that great. It only adds a d4, and only for dexterity saving throws, but the biggest drawback of all is that it uses their reaction. I gave it 5 points. And then Rabbit Hop. Now this is a decent feature. It can give the Harengon that boost to speed, bonus action disengage, or they can get up or over that barrier on the map. But they can't go through the barrier, so it's definitely not as good as teleporting, which would be worth 50 points, so I figure Rabbit Hop is worth 30. So Hair Trigger for 70, Leporine Senses for 4, Lucky Footwork for 5, and Rabbit Hop 30 gives the Harengon a total of 109 points, so it achieves S tier, right above the Eladrin and just below the Variant Human. Hobgoblin. Yet another race where I think a lot of players are missing something. The Hobgoblin is a pretty great option. First is darkvision, standard 10 points. Fey Ancestry is worth 10 points. Then the big 2 features. First is Fey Gift. This allows the Hobgoblin to use their bonus action to provide the help action proficiency bonus times. This alone is decent. I maybe would think it's worth 15 points. But in addition to that advantage, it also provides a secondary benefit, and you have 3 options to choose from. The Hobgoblin and the creature they help can get some temporary hit points, a 10-foot speed boost, or a creature hit by an attack by someone benefiting from the Hobgoblin's help gets disadvantage on their next attack. I think with this added on, I would total Fey Gift at 30 points. Then the biggest feature, Fortune of the Many. When the Hobgoblin misses with an attack or fails a saving throw or ability check, as long as they miss by 3 or less, then they can change the result so it's successful instead. I mean, technically the bonus is up to +3, but the only requirement for the +3 is the Hobgoblin is able to see 3 allies, so it should be +3 most of the time. I would argue a feature like this is better than magic resistance for saving throw insurance. Although spells represent a significant portion of saving throws, it's still probably less than half, and this can boost any saving throw. I'm focusing on saving throws here because I think most of the time, altering a failed saving throw is how I personally would use this. But if you wanted to, you could use this like Precision Strike without the random element. This is good. This is a 40-point feature. So Darkvision 10, Fey Ancestry 10, Fey Gift 30, and Fortune of the Many 40, and the Hobgoblin totals 90 points. That puts it in A tier, right between the Githzerai and the Air Genasi. Kenku. So the Kenku's first feature is Expert Duplication. This allows the Kenku to get advantage on ability checks to make duplicates of writing or craft work. This is great. It gets a solid 30 points. And that is my method of seeing if you're awake. This gets 2 points. It is a very small ribbon feature. Next is Kenku Recall. This provides 2 benefits. First, the Kenku gets proficiency in 2 skills of their choice. These are worth 5 each for 10 points. And then the Kenku can get advantage on any skill roll for which they're proficient, the standard proficiency bonus times per long rest. Now, if you are making a skill-focused character, whether you're planning it to be a grappler or a stealth expert, or you just plan to have a wide array of skills that you're good at, this will get you that advantage on the important checks. It is limited use, but has nice versatility. So I'm adding 20 points to the feature for a total of 30 points. Finally, the Kenku gets Mimicry, which allows the Kenku to accurately mimic sounds they've heard, including voices. This does not automatically trick someone. They get a Wisdom Insight check against a DC of 8 plus the Kenku's proficiency bonus and charisma modifier. For role-playing purposes, this is great. Lots of fun. For actual in-game usefulness, this probably doesn't quite get out of the ribbon feature range. I gave it 9 points for being a high-end ribbon. So really we only have 1 good feature. 2 for Expert Duplication, 30 for Kenku Recall, and 9 for Mimicry is a total of 41, and that puts the Kenku here on D tier, just ahead of the Forest Gnome and just behind the Fire Genasi. It is a low rank, though the Kenku really is sometimes the right option for specialized builds. That's why there's no F rank here, because there's no such thing as a race that never works. Kobold. We're starting with Darkvision, which is the standard 10 points. Then the main feature of the Kobold, Draconic Cry. This allows the Kobold to use their bonus action to use this feature, which will provide advantage on all attacks against enemies within 10 feet of them from when they use this feature until the start of their next turn. This feature can be used as standard proficiency bonus times per long rest. Draconic Cry is not great on every build. You need to kind of plan around it. For one thing, you need a character that's willing to get up close and personal with the enemies. And secondly, you'll want lots of attacks to get that advantage. So it pairs well with things like Summoning, Crossbow Expert, Polearm Master, Action Surge, Attacking Pets, all that stuff. When you have those things, then Draconic Cry is actually very good. I've assigned it 45 points. Finally, we get Kobold Legacy, which gives the Kobold 3 options. either proficiency in a skill, which would be worth 5 points, or advantage on saving throws versus the frightened condition, which would be worth 10, or a cantrip of their choice, which would also be worth 10. So, the best you can get is 10 points, the feature gets 10 points. And so we have 10 for darkvision, 45 for Necrotic Cry, and 10 more for Kobold Legacy, and the Kobold scores 65 points total. This puts them in B tier, right behind the Githyanki and ahead of the Mountain Dwarf. Lizardfolk. We start with movement, as the Lizardfolk gain a swimming speed equal to their walking speed, and that is valued at 10 points. Then we have a bite attack, which doesn't require a free hand, making it valuable for characters who like to grapple and also want to hold a shield, so it's worth 10 points. Moving on to hold breath, the Lizardfolk can hold their breath for up to 15 minutes. This obviously not nearly as powerful as not needing to breathe at all, and it is actually a fair bit shorter in duration than other races with similar features like the Tortle, so I'm giving it 4 points. Then Hungry Jaws. This allows the Lizardfolk to bite with their bonus action, and if they hit, they also get a very small amount of temporary hit points. This is a limited use feature, standard proficiency bonus times per long rest. This isn't a particularly powerful feature, but it's okay, so I gave it 10 points. Then the Lizardfolk has natural armor, which is basically like having mage armor permanently. This is obviously going to benefit very specific builds. Basically, any build without armor that also doesn't have unarmored defense. And that's not a lot of builds, but I figure it's still worth 15 points. Finally, Nature's Intuition is 2 skill proficiencies that you can choose, so that's 5 for each, 10 points. So swimming speed for 10, bite attack is 10, hold breath is 4, hungry jaws are 10, natural armor is 15, and Nature's Intuition is 10. There's no really big features here, but it is a good sized list, so it does add up to 59 points, which gets the Lizardfolk into C tier, right ahead of the Hill Dwarf and behind the Lightfoot Halfling. Minotaur. So when I think of the Minotaur, I want to imagine this. But what I get is unfortunately this. Horns is a standard 10 points, same reasoning as the Lizardfolk's bite. Then they have Goring Rush, which allows a bonus action attack with the Minotaur's horns after they take the dash action and move at least 20 feet. This one is not so good. Needing to take the dash action is a huge drawback, and it requires a bonus action, which means it doesn't even allow them to use their next feature in combination with this, so it ends up being basically a ribbon feature. I gave it 7 points. Then Hammering Horns is up next, and it's the Minotaur's big feature. When the Minotaur hits a creature within 5 feet, no more than one size larger than them with a melee attack on their turn, then they can use their bonus action to attempt to push the target 10 feet away from them. The target gets a strength saving throw to avoid the effect, and this is a decent feature if you plan around it, but it's not amazing. I gave it 25 points. Finally, the Minotaur gets Labyrinthine Recall, which provides the Minotaur 2 benefits. First, they always know which direction is north, maybe 3 points. Then they gain advantage on Wisdom survival checks to navigate or track, so that's a bit better, maybe 5 points, total of 8 points. So Horns for 10, Goring Rush for 7, Hammering Horns for 25, Labyrinthine Recall for 8, and that's a total of 50 points. That is enough for the Minotaur to just squeak to the low end of C tier. Come on, Wizards, you could have at least given the Minotaur a powerful build. Orc. So, yeah, speaking of powerful build, let's talk about the Orc. Let's start with one of their better features, though, Adrenaline Rush. This allows the Orc to dash as a bonus action with the standard limited uses, and whenever they use it, they also gain a small number of temporary hit points. It's not as good as a teleport, or even as good as a Harengon hop, but it's a decent feature, and I figure it's worth 25 points. Then Darkvision, a standard 10 points. Powerful build, because Orcs are built powerfully, unlike the Minotaur, worth 5 points. Then the other of their main features, the Orc gets the Half-Orc's Relentless Endurance, which we already established is worth 25 points. So, Adrenaline Rush for 25, Darkvision for 10, Powerful Build for 5, and Relentless Endurance is worth 25, so the Orc totals 65 points. This puts them on the low side of B tier. Satyr. This is a race I usually see near the top of any racial tier ranking chart, so I'm about to become unpopular with some viewers. Don't worry though, Satyr still does well. Walking speed of 35 is worth 20 points. Then Ram, the Satyr can hit with their goat horns and apparently do the same damage as a Minotaur's bull horns. Yes, I am salty about that. 10 points. Magic resistance, which gives the Satyr advantage on all saving throws against spells. This is a good feature, but honestly, I think it can be overvalued. It's not like most of your saving throws are against spells or anything, but it is a good feature at the very top of my saving throw advantage point values at 35 points. Then Mirthful Leaps. The Satyr adds a d8 feet to the distance of any jump they make, but it still costs movement as normal. And that's the killer. This is no Harengon hop, not even close. This is a ribbon and it's worth 5 points. Finally, Reveler provides 2 set skill proficiencies, they are worth 4 each, and a musical instrument proficiency for 1 point, and that gives us a total of 9 points. So walking speed 20, ram 10, magic resistance 35, and mirthful leaps 5, and finally Reveler for 9 adds up to 79. That puts them nowhere near the top of our list, but it still ranks a strong A, ahead of the stout halfling, but behind the Githzerai. Sea Elf. So let's go through the features, and they get quite a few. First, we have the swim speed, worth 10 points. Then Child of the Sea, which is 2 features. First, breathing water is worth 10. And secondly, resistance to cold damage is worth 15. So that's a total of 25 for Child of the Sea. Darkvision nets the Sea Elf another 10 points. Then Fey Ancestry, they get another 10. Then Friend of the Sea. The Sea Elf can communicate with swimming beasts, but they have no special ability to communicate back. And we have our first ribbon. I gave it 3 points. Then Keen Senses is a free skill proficiency worth 4. And Trance is normally worth 10, but the Sea Elf also gets the 2 proficiencies in weapons or tools, so that's another 2, so Trance gets 12. And we have a pretty long list. Swim Speed 10, Child of the Sea 25, Darkvision 10, Fey Ancestry 10, Friend of the Sea 3, Keen Senses 4, and Trance 12. It all adds up to a respectable 74 points, and the Sea Elf is sitting at the low end of A tier. Shadar Kai. So for a lot of folks, this is the best race in the game, period. Doesn't quite reach that level on my list, but it still does really well. Blessing of the Raven Queen, they can teleport 30 feet as a bonus action with a standard usage limit, and they get resistance to all damage until the start of the next turn whenever they use it. So the teleportation of this feature alone is worth 50 points. But then we have the resistance. And I think the common viewpoint is that this is superior to any of the things the Eladrin get with Phase Step. I'm inclined towards them being pretty close to even, just because there's that Spring Eladrin option to teleport a different creature, which is also really good. But I do think Blessing of the Raven Queen is just a hair better. But it is really close. I gave this 72 points. Then the Standard Darkvision for 10 points. Fey Ancestry is 10 points. Keen Senses is worth 4. Then what I consider is the real reason why the Shadar Kai are more powerful than the Eladrin, Necrotic Resistance all the time. That's worth 20. Finally, Trance worth 10 points, but with the 2 additional proficiencies for a total of 12. So Blessing of the Raven Queen for 72, Darkvision 10, Fey Ancestry 10, Keen Senses 4, Necrotic Resistance 20, Trance for 12. That's a total of 128 points. And the Shadar Kai is S tier, right behind the aarakocra, but ahead of the Aasimar. Not too shabby. Shifter. So first off, Bestial Instincts, a free skill with a selection, is worth 5 points. Then the Standard Darkvision is worth 10 points. And then the big feature, Shifting. So Shifting takes a bonus action, lasts up to 1 minute, and the Shifter can use it a number of times equal to their proficiency bonus per long rest. When they shift, here's what happens. First, the Shifter gets a moderate number of temporary hit points, and 1 additional benefit of 4 that the player chooses from a character creation. Either they get a few more temporary hit points and a +1 armor class, or they gain a bonus action natural weapon attack, or a 10-foot movement speed bonus and a reaction 10-foot move when a creature ends its turn right by the Shifter that doesn't provoke opportunity attacks, or they can gain advantage on wisdom checks, and no creature within 30 feet of them can make an attack roll with advantage against them unless they're incapacitated. Now, if any of these benefits were permanent, this feature would be worth much more. But a few minutes per day, using a few bonus actions, is the big limitation. Like the Wild Hunt selection would be amazing combined with raging, reckless attacking barbarians, but it would take 2 bonus actions to set up, and that ends up being a big drawback. Some of these would probably be worth 50 or even 60 points if they were always on, but since they're not, I figure this is closer to half that much, 30 points. So Bestial Instincts for 5, Dark Vision for 10, and Shifting is 30. And that's a total of 45 points, putting the Shifter in D tier, right ahead of the Kenku and right behind the Fire Genasi. Tabaxi. I have to say the Tabaxi is one of my favorite races, maybe because I'm a cat owner. We start with a climbing speed, that's worth 10 points. Then Cat's Claws, these only get 5 points, because I'm assuming they're talking about the claws on the Tabaxi's hands. I mean, if you figure a Tabaxi can make foot claw attacks with this, then give them an additional 5 points. Then Cat's Talent. 2 set skill proficiencies, that's worth 8. Then the standard range Dark Vision, that's worth 10. And then the iconic Tabaxi feature, Feline Agility. Basically, the Tabaxi can take a double move for free. This does not have a hard limit on uses. Instead, it gets recharged whenever they move 0 feet on a different turn. This is a strong feature, but it is difficult to narrow down on a point total because it's hard to compare to anything else. I mean, the plus 10 movement of a centaur, I assigned 40 points, but that's just a flat movement bonus. This one does have limits to its use, but I do think it's stronger overall. So I'm giving Feline Agility 50 points. I don't know if that's right or wrong. It's kind of like the Changeling, where it's tough to compare it to anything. But, as it happens, I gave the exact same score to Shape Changer, so 50 points. So Climb Speed for 10, Cat's Claws for 5, Cat's Talent for 8, Dark Vision for 10, and Feline Agility for 50, and the Tabaxi gets 83 points. That puts them at A tier, behind the Githzerai, but ahead of the Satyr. Makes sense, cats are better than goats. Tortle. Okay, so there's no way the Tortle is attacking with foot claws. This is definitely a 5-point feature. Then Hold Breath, which I figure is about half as good as not needing to breathe at all, 5 points. Then the big one, Natural Armor. I'll remind you I gave the Lizardfolk's Natural Armor 15 points, but this one is much better because the Tortle can dump their Dexterity and still get a 17 armor class, 19 with Shield. This isn't a big deal for, say, a Paladin, so we don't see many Tortle Paladins in optimized builds. But for a Druid, for a Blade Singer, for even a Barbarian, this can be pretty potent. So I will be giving it a fair bit higher score than the Lizardfolk's version, 40 points. I actually think this really works nicely because, once again, here's what a Tortle looks like. I don't see this creature as having a high dexterity, so they put a feature in where the Tortle doesn't need a high dexterity, which is kind of ingenious, really. Then Nature's Intuition is a skill proficiency with a choice, and that's worth 5. And then Shell Defense. This feature sounds so cool, but mechanically the benefits are just way too small considering the penalties. Like, plus 4 armor class is a lot, unless you're giving your enemies advantage to hit you. It's ultimately a ribbon feature, and I assigned it 6 points. So Claws 5, Hold Breath 5, Natural Armor 40, Nature's Intuition 5, and Shell Defense 6, and the Tortle has a total of 61 points. This puts the Tortle at the top end of the C tier, ahead of the Changeling. Triton. So, of course, we're going to start with a swim speed, and that's worth 10 points. Then Amphibious, which is water breathing, worth 10 points. Then Control Air and Water. Level 1, the Triton can cast Fog Cloud once for free, and then the usual options with existing spell slots. Then they can cast Gust of Wind at level 3, and Water Walk at level 5. If you recall the aarakocra from my last tier rank video, Gust of Wind was worth 20 points. Then you get 10 more for Fog Cloud, and I'm only giving Water Walk 5 points, because A, it's got the ritual tag, so casting it once without a spell slot, and then the subsequent castings require spell slots, really devalues this. And B, I mean, it's a bit devalued because the Triton is amphibious and has a swim speed. So often they're not going to need it for themselves at all. So in total, Control Air and Water, worth 35 points. Then they get the standard Dark Vision, 10 points. Emissary of the Sea is a lot like the Sea Elf's Friend of the Sea, except this one also includes elementals and monstrosities. I gave that feature 3 points, so I'm going to add 1 more point for the elementals, 1 more point for the monstrosities, for a total of 5. And Guardian of the Depths is cold resistance, that's worth 15. So swim speed 10, amphibious 10, control air and water is 35, dark vision's worth 10, emissary of the sea is 5, and guardian of the depths is 15. And that's a total of 85 points. That puts the Triton in A tier, right behind the Goblin and ahead of the Githzerai. Water Genasi. So from one swimming, water breathing race to another, the swim speed is of course worth 10 points. The water Genasi bucks the trend of cold resistance, and instead they get acid resistance, which is the same value, it's worth 15 points. Amphibious is 10 of course. Then Call to the Wave. The water Genasi can cast Acid Splash, a middle-of-the-road cantrip, create or destroy water, which is okay but circumstantial, and Water Walk, again with a Water Walk, with a water-breathing swimming creature. So Acid Splash gets 5 points, create or destroy water 10, and Water Walk gets 5, so Call to the Wave, unfortunately, only totals 20 points. Then Dark Vision is the standard 10 points. So add it up, swim speed is 10, acid resistance 15, amphibious 10, Call to the Wave 20, and Dark Vision 10, and that is a total of 65 points. The Water Genasi ends up behind the Kobold, but ahead of the Mountain Dwarf in B tier. So, if you're looking for a race that can swim and breathe water, you'll probably get more bang from your buck with either the Sea Elf or the Triton. They were both A tier. Yuan-ti. So we finish up with the Yuan-ti. Once considered either the most or nearly the most powerful race in the game, and then they got nerfed. But how badly? Well, standard dark vision is 10 points. Then magic resistance, which is just like the Satyrs, is worth 35. Then poison resilience is 17 points for the damage resistance and 10 for the saving throw advantage, so it's worth 27. And finally, serpentine spellcasting. The Yuan-ti can cast poison spray and animal friendship without limit, but the animal friendship is only with snakes, and then they can cast suggestion at 3rd level. So poison spray is a lower value cantrip, I gave it 2 points. Then animal friendship with snakes is really circumstantial, I gave it 5. But suggestion is a solid spell, I gave it 20 points, and that's a total of 27 for serpentine spellcasting. So dark vision 10, magic resistance 35, poison resilience 27, and serpentine spellcasting 27, that adds up to 99 points. And even with the nerf, Yuan-ti still is S tier. It's ahead of the Goblin, but behind the Eladrin. So yeah, they were nerfed, but they're still a top tier race. And so here's our chart so far. We have pretty even placing across the tiers. In my next video, I'll be adding the races from setting books, so whether your favorite race is from Spelljammer, Wildmount, Ravnica, Eberron, or the Forgotten Realms, make sure to tune in for that. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks everybody, and I'll talk to you soon.